And what we're going to do tonight is really, it's a lot more give and take, and we want to make sure that West Seattle people get to talk to Mike a little bit, and it's kind of nice that we didn't quite pack every seat, because that gives us a little more time. And I'm known as a roadmaster, you know, so as we go along, we'll talk about how we'll do this process tonight so that everybody gets a chance to talk. So we'll start, I'll be introducing the chairs of our district councils who are sponsoring this tonight. Thank you so much for making the room and putting this on. Councilmember Obrien will talk, and I'll give you guys the secret of what's going on with the dots. So first, let's have the council folks, or excuse me, the district council folks introduce themselves first, and then we'll get going.
Hi, I'm Sharon Meeks, and I co-chair the Southwest District Council. This is my second go-around with co-chairing, and I live right up this hill. Been involved in our community here for about 33 years, and plan on staying involved. And I'm just really appreciative that you came tonight, and I see that we're building momentum. Thanks.
And I'm Vlad Ustimovich. I'm with the other co-chair of the Southwest District Council, and I've been on the board of the Fauntleroy Community Association now for, gosh, about 15 years.
And I'm Matt McBride. I'm the chair of the Delridge Neighborhoods District Council, the eastern half of West Seattle. And I want to echo Sharon's statements. I want to thank everyone for being out here tonight. I know that as we chairs of neighborhood councils and district councils and people that are involved in the community, it's really tremendously important for us to see people come out to events like this, to have dialogue with their elected officials, to have meaningful conversation about important issues, which I feel this is a tremendously important issue for Seattle right now. So I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing all of your questions, your comments. I know Mike is here. He's very excited to have that dialogue with you as well. Mike, I want to thank you for coming here tonight. And Cindy, I'll turn it back over to you.
And we also want to thank you, Petrie, at the back. She is our coordinator, the neighborhood district coordinator for the Southwest area, and so she helps us do all this kind of outreach work. So how we want to do tonight is, how many of you plan on making a comment or offering Mike a suggestion tonight? Can I see your hands?
Oh, come on.
Oh, come on. You know, and, which is good. I mean, because one of it was, if every one of you raised your hands, I was going to be on speed mode, but it looks like we can use kind of the slow wiper mode here. And the way we want to do it is, in order for everybody to get a chance to make their comments about our two main topics tonight, what concerns you about what's going on in West Seattle, and what ideas or suggestions that you might want to put forward for Mike to listen to, I usually start at one side of the room and I just go across. That keeps me from having to remember you're the fourth hand that went up, you know. So we're just going to go like this across, and it looks like I'll have time to say, anybody else come up with something, you know, have a great thought, bouncing off someone else. And then we start over here and we go back, because that way if you guys on that side take up too much time at the beginning, you never get back to you. You have Pete, pointing specifically at Pete. So that way I don't have to say, you know, you've been talking for 5 minutes, please get off the stage. Please respect other people's times, because we do want to try and let as many people get heard. For those of you who didn't want to talk, and that's why you got the green dots, Josh Vogt is the legislative aide for Mike. He's going to be writing down stuff. And then on the way out, you'll have two sets of things you can comment on. You can put dots on things that you want to confirm. You know, these are my concerns too. You could spend one dot on that and one dot on this. You could put all four of your dots. But you can also vote on the ideas that come out of this. You know, what are good ideas that we should do? You can spend all four of your dots on that side. But that's so that the people who don't like to speak can also say, I want to weigh in and this is what I'm thinking too. So that's why it's important, if you do have something, please feel comfortable to be able to say it. Don't assume that, you know, we don't want to hear ideas. It's just a matter of time. We will end promptly at 8 tonight, I promise, so he can get home to kids. And let me look at my notes to make sure I covered everything. Oh, are you going to say something about the June 28th thing?
Yeah.
You want me to do it now? Or
Go ahead.
Okay. So we'd heard rumors that the Department of Planning and Development does want to come out and talk with West Seattle, somewhat similar to this, but more with their staff. And so they have set a date and a time, which I left on the dining room table, but it was Saturday morning, June 28th. And I believe it was like 9:30 to 11:30, but it'll be in that morning time frame. DPD wants to come out and have a similar conversation with us, but with a little bit more detail, bring their staff, talk about land use issues, how it intersects with our transportation concerns. She gave me like 4 things. So watch for that. Just be aware that they're planning on doing that. So mark that date. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike. He'll say a few words, and then I'll come back and we'll do our sweep.
Cindy, thank you so much for organizing this too. I was at a similar meeting in Ballard probably about a month ago now. And Cindy was there and said, this was such a fun show, I want to bring it back to my neighborhood. We've had a lot of dialogue about trying to make this as a productive conversation, hopefully for all of you and also for me as possible. And so I really appreciate your, not just for this event, your ongoing engagement with city issues. It's really great. My name is Mike Obrien, Seattle City Council member. I'm going to confess something. I never asked to be land use chair. I promise. This was not what I wanted to do. I love the issues around land use. They obviously affect all of our lives, and I'm learning a lot. It's a field that goes from the experience we all completely understand living in a city about how it impacts our lives, on down to the nitty-gritty of all sorts of laws that I'm still beginning to appreciate, but I'm trying to get up to speed as fast as I can. My goal tonight is to be here and hear from folks in the room. I really appreciate the format that Cindy came up with so that we have a chance to hear from the people that want to talk and for those that also have ideas but are less comfortable talking in front of an open group tonight. So with that, I think I'm going to stop my talking. Let's start hearing from folks. If I have clarifying questions or comments to what I hear from the audience, I'll ask those, but I'm really hoping to learn as much about both the kind of sentiment and feeling of how people are feeling about West Seattle and kind of right direction, wrong direction, what's working, what's not. And then also specifically, what are the things that we can work on to make things improve?
Okay, I think what we'll try and do, I can yell enough, I don't need the microphone. We want to make sure, we'll test drive, so if we can do it without the microphones, we will, but we've got them ready to go. So I'm going to start on this side, like I promised. Is there anybody over in this side who'd like to make a comment? John?
I have a question. With Seattle's encouragement of ADUs and backyard cottages, why do you think you guys changed the minimum lot area from 2,000 square feet to 2,500 square feet, which with a combination of a director's rule, which allows in 2,500 square feet, 10 square feet, which is 2 by 5. This square, that's the tolerance. That has eliminated an additional dozens of unbuilt, non-gerrymandered, non-horsed-around lots. What was the intention of that?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, sorry. So are you talking about the small lot legislation that was just passed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is the question around, we set an absolute minimum of,
2,500 square feet, yes, sir.
right. And you were saying that it was 2,000 square feet before?
The preliminary recommendation was 2,000 square feet. And the issue is that there are dozens and dozens of lots around West Seattle that are just straight ahead lots that are platted as 25 by 100 feet. And that would be, you assume that would fit into your 2,500 foot minimum. However, if those lots are surveyed, they survey to be slightly less.
Yeah.
And the tolerance for that slightly less is 0.004%. And so, in effect, there are dozens and dozens more lots that are...
So you're talking about lots that folks believe are 2,500 square feet, but when surveyed will just show they're unbuildable now.
Exactly.
So we passed small lot legislation a few weeks ago. I imagine some of the folks, I know some of the folks in the room were tracking that pretty closely. I guess I can't really answer why we did it. It was 9 people voting, and that's where we reached.
So this was actually, I missed something I was supposed to say. So this is a good example of when he goes, I don't have that answer on my fingertip. Josh will stay as long as we need to tonight to get your name, your number, and get an answer back to you if we're not able to do it right here, right this minute. Because we don't want people to feel like, well, they couldn't answer it, I'm done. So, and that particularly applies, I saw this in Ballard, this is why we are doing it. People would come up and they had drawings of a building that they were concerned about, and like, Mike, read this thing right here. We don't have time for that tonight. So if you've got something specific, talk about what the concern is, but we'll work the details with Josh afterwards.
Well, I think this is a done deal, and these lots are now worthless. But my question was, were you aware of that ahead of time when you passed that legislation?
Yes. I mean, I personally was trying to balance some concerns there about not prohibiting folks from being
Right,
able
when
to
I
build
contacted
homes.
your office and you didn't know, right after your press release on the 16th, I believe it was, and you referred me to Andy McKim, the author of this, that was because you knew and you didn't want to tell me?
So we're gonna go ahead, so like I said, we'll stay and talk,
All
right?
right, thank you.
There'll be some conversation, but I'm gonna keep moving. By the way, there's no clock in this room, so I am shooting for, at 7:15, we switch over to solutions. So thank you, John. Any more comments on this? I'm sweeping. Okay.
I actually grew up here and really detest the rape of West Seattle because of these zoning changes, and am fearful that we're going to turn out like Ballard. I'm curious, when did the city substitute quality of life for quantity of life? We do live on a peninsula. You keep cramming these people in here. We only got one bridge, and the time that it used to take to get downtown, you can pretty much figure 45 minutes if you get rush hour traffic. So I'm not buying this urban village because the rationale is to keep county growth down, county growth is up. I mean, you got the Department of Neighborhoods here who keeps pushing for community involvement. We're building all these apartments. You got a transitory population coming in, and the city itself recognizes that the increase in population doesn't support the infrastructure that's required for the community. So that's both my opinion and the question of how far is it going to go here in West Seattle?
I don't have an answer to how far it's going to go.
Well, then maybe you can answer this. With all this new building that's going on, how are we supposed to navigate getting off of the peninsula? Because we don't have a monorail.
Yep, so we'll keep capturing that. That's one I'm hoping people have ideas and suggestions for when we come back to sweep 2. Okay, going along then. Anybody comments? John?
Yeah, so is there a citywide
I
movement
think
for
we can-
reforming land use?
Well, I guess I could answer that a couple different ways. There's all sorts of specific aspects of the land use code that different individuals or different groups or different neighborhoods have concerns about that want reformed. And so whether you're in a single-family neighborhood, small lots might be a really big issue for you. If you're in a low-rise, how we interpret the LR3 code, for example, is something that's a concern. And so I am, and DPD is addressing these issues as they come up. And there are a lot of them, and with the resources, it's not a comprehensive, we're going to throw the code out and start from scratch. It's kind of one by one. I see you nodding. Is that a, yes, throw the code out and start by scratch, or?
No, it's not. It's
There's a
just-
suggestion, someone.
Yeah, so,
But I mean, the other piece is, the comprehensive plan, which is kind of a guiding document for the city, is going through a major overhaul right now. And, these major overhauls are required by the state every about 10 years. And it can be a kind of administrative check the box. We did our overhaul and met, found the new targets. I think the hope at the city is they're actually going to want to take a look at our comprehensive plan and really rethink how we organize our thinking around how growth happens, where it happens, how we manage that growth in the city. And that doesn't get down to an issue of how big a lot you can develop on, but it does offer some guiding principles that, this is a project, or a process that's getting underway right now and will last about a year of the comprehensive plan overview.
So this is an opportunity now for change.
Yes.
Yes,
And I'm gonna add up there, June 24th is the next big public meeting on the comp plan. They've been taking a lot of public comments for at least 3 meetings. They had one out here at Youngstown. So now they're taking those and they've rolled them up into key directions. So they're looking for people to come out. It's gonna be at Seattle Center, I'll write this up there, Seattle Center on the evening of the Tuesday, the 24th. So that's where you want to come say, you're heading in the right direction, or no, you're not heading in the right direction. So I'll get that up there, so. Okay, so continuing then, Jim?
Bringing this thing for me, protection the resident has in this whole process. When I buy a house, I look at it and I'm told the zoning is 100 foot by 50. And I buy a house, the idea I might have the open space around me, and there'll be other places where apartments and single-family residents will be done. Then all of a sudden, the city makes a change, we go to 50 to 100 foot lots. So all of a sudden now, the spatialness I think I'd be expecting from the lots next to me have been degraded, they're cut in half. And then you come along and say, okay, now, because you're in so many feet of a transit line, which you created after the fact also, do we have a lot sitting in here where you put mini houses and you don't do any parking or anything, you put that in there? So where do you say, wait a minute, where's the quality of life now? And what do you consider as you infringe or change the rules that allow more infringement upon those people who purchase homes, the idea of having open space around them?
I think there's a balance that we're always trying to strike between kind of the common good and what are the individual rights. And, as the gentleman who spoke a minute ago, I don't know if you own one of these lots or not, but the rule we recently changed was around small lots. And we placed further restrictions on what could happen before. Previously, there was a lot of types of development that's been allowed, and we've restricted that. We haven't seen much of that development, frankly, because the economics was such for a long time that it didn't make a lot of sense. The house would pop up here and there. But with the growth we've seen and in our city and the demand for housing and the pricing of housing specifically going up, all of a sudden lots that weren't particularly interesting to developers became more interesting. And so it wasn't, I would argue that we didn't actually change the laws to undermine what you said, but rather that happened. And I think it's important for folks to understand the 5,000 square foot lot that you describe in our single family zoning is largely in what we call single family 5,000 zoning. Something like 45% of the lots that are zoned single family 5,000 are actually smaller than 5,000 square foot lots.
But look at that, you said you made a statement. You didn't change zoning necessarily, but economic impact changes desirability, which impacted then the zoning. So a place where you did not have the zoning before, when you bring up the economics high enough, it makes it price bill to do that. What's the protection for us who've already bought, who have contributed to the city, who put into the utilities and everything else, and all of a sudden you come in and you crunch it? I mean, what you say the government has, but what's the right of the individual in that government? I mean, if I'm being imposed, don't tell me go DVD, because I've been there. Where do we go? I mean, where do we get heard as individuals in relationship to their local community?
I don't have a great answer for that. I mean, the challenge is the person who owned the lot, I don't know if you have specifically been impacted, but I know others have. There's a lot next to you that the assumption has always been that this was a house on a lot, and it turns out they could put 2 houses on the lots, and they could be taller and closer to my house. That right always existed, and the person that owned that house may have known that from the beginning, or whoever bought it with that intent. And it's hard to take away that right. We did. We just adjusted.
You had 100-foot lots before. You're now allowing 50-foot lots. That is taking away. That is not the way it was before. You split the lot in half now. You allow 2 where there's 1. And I'm living there, when I come in there, there's only 1 house there. And that's why I figured it's going to be there. and then you come along and you make the zoning, you change the size of lot sizes, you've now got two houses on the one. I lived through it.
But we didn't change anything that allowed 100 for 50.
You changed lots, said you go from 100 square foot lots to 50 foot lots.
Okay, so we'll put that up, right. But your question is really, how does an individual get heard when you realize that the city is moving under the flow?
Beforehand even,
Right.
yeah.
Yep, all right. Matt? And then,
So Mike, we've heard a couple of times the word opportunity, the Seattle 2035 movement. I like the word opportunity. I share the concern of, I think, a lot of people in that right now, it feels a little Wild Westy as far as development goes. If you live next to a large-sized lot, you're worried because you don't know what's going to happen, and it might turn into something that doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood or the block or whatever, and all of the other issues that brings along with it. What interests me is the concept of what was done in High Point, what's, I believe, currently happening up at Yesler Terrace, more intentional growth areas where we're looking at them and saying this area is designated as a population growth area, providing a place where those things are intended to happen so that people understand, oh, that is a high growth area, I am not in that area. Kind of like we created a stadium district so that we could park a bunch of stadiums in it. Is it possible to take this opportunity to create high population growth districts?
The answer is yes. How we actually do that and functioning, the examples you talked about with High Point and Yesler Terrace, those are both Seattle Housing Authority. And so those are fairly unique where you have one owner of a property.
Right.
But the questions on the redo of the comprehensive plan are a lot around where are we going to take the growth. So the State Growth Management Act goes through all the math and says this is how many people are coming, this is how many jobs, and starts to allocate those to counties and then cities of where the growth, how much growth we need to accommodate. And the comprehensive plan, the questions we're out asking the public is, do we want the growth to be spread around into urban villages, of which there are, 37?
7, 8?
Or do we want to concentrate it in the urban centers, of which there are 5? Or do we want it around high-capacity transit nodes? And so those are the types of questions we're asking that kind of get at, I think, and to the extent that we're not asking the right question, we want to hear about that too.
Yeah, Matt, when we come back on the solution side, would you make sure that gets up on the solution sheet? Okay. Jean?
I don't know if this is really an idea or a comment, but the urban village idea way back when was partly responsible for the micro-housing that's come upon us now with no parking if you're within a certain distance from a metro parking ride or metro stop. And then along comes the metro with its economic problems and it says, sorry, we're not going to have a line here. And is there some way that there's a mechanism for revisiting these policies so that when times change, policy can change and not keep in perpetuity this concept that is no longer working?
There needs to be, and we need to figure that out, because you're absolutely right. When we set a policy based on a certain transit level of service and that level of service goes away, then the policy needs to be revisited immediately. And so we're both working on making sure that the transit doesn't go away, because that's critically important. But I think I also need to recognize that how we respond to that. So that's a good concern. Thank you.
I'm going to, just for folks who came in, we're sweeping from one side to the other on concerns. And because I've seen some new people sit over here, we'll try and make a fast two-sweeper. And then we'll do a second sweep on solutions. So just, Vicki.
This is one of my concerns.
Okay, you're going to have to speak up, or we're going to mic you.
Let me stand up. There seems to be a one-size-fits-all with the urban village concept. And I have grave concerns about that for West Seattle because the underlying assumption is we have all the basic services in every urban village. But West Seattle lacks a hospital. West Seattle has very restricted access in and out. And we also share the roads with a very commuter traffic of over 1 million cars passing through our neighborhood. So I would like to see a revisit of that that takes into account the specific restrictions of each urban village.
We're gonna come back to you. We're gonna make that come up on the suggestions again too. Maybe we should have just said, we'll try and phrase them so that we put your dots in the right place. So, okay, so I'm keeping moving here. Renee, and then and then I'll get you in the back, sorry.
Okay.
I should stand right in the front so I can see where my meter's going.
I don't mind a lot of these meetings in the past, and we talk about real big projects. And then the council passes these rules and regulations. In my opinion, a big decision, you should have a environmental impact statement. How is it going to impact the neighborhood, the quality of life? They never asked those questions in the past. These neighborhood villages, they're good in theory, but they're sort of bad for transportation. I would like environmental impact statements to be part of the norm when you have a big decision to make. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Renee?
Hi, Mike. I'm Renee Commons. I'm the director of the West Seattle Junction Neighborhood Organization, JUNO. And I've got a couple of questions regarding the need for a change in our city leadership to be sensitive to preserving our neighborhood character. There was a lot of work that went into the West Seattle Junction Urban Village Design Guidelines by community. I wasn't part of this process, but there are many in this room that worked on this for over, how many years was it to put this?
Almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years. I was part of the framework process. Raise your hand if you were too, here when we were talking about what could become of the West Seattle Triangle and how to make it better for the neighborhood. But what we're seeing now, or with the new zoning rules, we're seeing a lot of out-of-scale development, abutting single-family and low-rise neighborhoods that seem to be out of character. So is there a more neighborhood outreach approach from the city that we can see that will be more sensitive on a neighborhood level from DPD to work with us rather than a large city level? Two, are you aware of the DPD growth targets for 2024? 1 out of 7 neighborhoods, West Seattle Junction is one of them, are exceeding their 2024 growth targets by over 200%. We're at 216% of our 2024 growth target in the year 2013. We still have 10 years to go. Why the influx without the infrastructure? Is there a cap on development that's happening in any of these neighborhoods right now? Because we really feel the imbalance right now with where the neighborhood concerns are and DPD's allocation of, on continuous zoning.
Okay, pause.
Pause.
Do you want
Thank
to comment on any? Because I'm
And I
probably
want
going to
one-
say,
Just the cap, and then the last thing is impact fees
Okay.
on developers to go to fund neighborhood projects.
We want to go in reverse order.
Thank you.
So impact fees are definitely something we're looking at. We're trying to understand from our legal folks how they can be used and applied in largely built-out urban environment like Seattle as opposed to a new development in the suburbs. So there are some tools there.
To localize it somewhat?
Yeah, and so there's some tools and some restrictions, but we think there are some options there that I think I'm hoping can bring forward some solutions to some of the problems we have. I'm working a lot on some affordable housing issues right now because that's also another challenge
Yes,
throughout the city. And finding tools for affordability is something we're looking at, and so that work with impact fees overlaps a bit. The issue of cap is one. There is no cap in place right now anywhere in the city of Seattle.
Nowhere, not even Queen Anne? I thought I heard, no.
I mean, there are places where there's not much zoning for new work to happen, but there's new buildings going up. Even in Queen Anne, I saw one coming online the other day. And so, how we address that issue around growth and hitting growth targets, I think, is a question that I'm hearing a lot from people, not just in West Seattle, but throughout the city. Ballard is another big one that's hit their targets, and then some, and a long time to go. So, it's a challenge we're facing because, when I think back to when I started in office 4 or 5 years ago, and we were in the depths of recession, and I think a lot of us knew people that were out of work and really struggling. And we wanted job growth to happen, and now we have this amazing job growth happening, and it's like, wow, this is a little overwhelming. And we just heard last week that Seattle was the fastest growing city in the country last year, and we also know it's one of the largest price increases in rental housing too. And how do we manage somewhere in between where we have this nice kind of moderate amount of growth that keeps our people employed but doesn't create the kind of wild changes that are really hard to manage? I don't have a great answer for that, but we are struggling with that. And then your last question, your first question about managing the growth specifically, is the urban design framework around the triangle like too big in scope? Are you looking for something that addresses it block by block? Or are you saying that even when we came out of that, it didn't address the concerns we really have?
Well, to some degree it did, but I think what we're faced with is preserving neighborhood character around these, but they're unenforceable. They're just recommendations when we go into design review and working with developers on community outreach. They're not bound to do any of this. These are just suggestions.
Got it.
So it's a
And
kind
so-
of a crisis level when you're asking for, more for your neighborhood to make it more livable, wider sidewalks, bigger pathways, things like that are recommended in here, lower
But not the tools to
modulation.
enforce it.
Modulation, but there's
Exactly.
no tools because it's something.
And so is it more about those types of elements, modulation, sidewalks, setbacks,
Lots of
or is
that.
it about an apartment building where there used to be a house?
It's probably both. I mean, I think we need more of someone from DPD that's on a neighborhood level, and SDOT to really kind of work with the community. Thank you.
Oh, man. I know your hand's back there, but you got three people in front of you. You, then Dick, and then I promise you in the back, right? So let's see another hand. Go.
Okay, my name is Agi Farid. I'm a resident here and also part of Juno. One thing that somebody alluded to earlier had to do with not all the urban villages are the same. And one thing that always comes up here is no parking requirements. And I have contacted DPD a few times, and I even gave them some information from for walk and transit score that is used for planning, for example. And this is
So I am going to say the preamble's we're 5 minutes away from being done with the first suite, and I'm only halfway across the room. So
It's going
make
to be very
it a
short.
little more concise.
It's going to be under 2 minutes.
But I'm getting ready for the guy behind us.
Okay. So basically, to sum her up, I guess, I haven't had a chance to talk, but anyway, is that places like Capitol Hill and University have higher scores, like
walk
you said,
scores.
walk scores and transit scores, where West Seattle is like in 50s, something like that. But there has to be some a study done to see what is the appropriate parking ratio for certain, urban villages area. And I think I just stop there.
Great.
Yeah.
Great, and I've
So
heard that
you get a second chance.
Yeah, that's
right?
fine.
Okay.
I've heard that before about using walk score, so that's intriguing.
Mike, thanks again. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for your work, particularly knowing this wasn't a job you campaigned for.
Well, I certainly love serving the people of Seattle. I just didn't anticipate landing so soon.
Okay, so I know that on the Plus Committee, you're going to be taking up, or are taking up, the question of notice. And several people have raised variations on the theme of why not involve neighborhoods, and I'll come back to this and I'll put it in writing, but it seems to me that at the core, the planning process, beginning with DPD, doesn't pull neighborhoods into the planning process. And in particular, I don't see why, particularly when you're doing some kind of development that is out of character, out of scale, is either small lots or apartments, anything that doesn't fit, why you can't have a simple, don't have to go to total environmental review, the big design review, but simple design review that pulls the neighborhoods together. rather than simply put up a notice somewhere and see whether or not there's pushback? Why not a poll?
So, specifically about micro housing, or apartments is the brand name that people hear about, we are convening a work group that will meet for the next, a few times in the next month and a half to discuss issues just like that, to figure out how we can do this better. And so that concern I've heard multiple times in the last number of months, and in forums like this and at City Hall. And so we're trying to think through how we can do something like that. Thanks, Dave.
Yes, I'm skipping him for you, so.
Thank you. Michael, thanks for coming out to see us. Last summer, Michael rode his bike. Well, he got on the bus, and he got off the bus, got on his bike, hauled it up my front stairs, was on my front yard, and walked around with some of our neighbors.
You live on a hill.
To look, yeah. So I wonder
You all do,
if
I guess.
Michael was responsive to our neighborhood concerns. I live 2 doors from Renee, okay? DPD is dysfunctional. It's as simple as that. We've gone through too many meetings with Gary Papers, especially in West Seattle and our neighborhood, in which they talk about things like urban texture, and, well, we dug as deep as we could, which doesn't address the environmental impact and what large, bulky developments do to our neighborhood in West Seattle, okay? The paradigm change that I think should come about, and again, Michael, I don't expect you to comment on any of these, I'm just saying these, is that we need to get away from this overriding statement. You mentioned about Seattle, the largest growing big city. This world-class city and this density and vibrance, there's no vibrance when you have to wait for 3 buses in West Seattle at 6 o'clock to get downtown to work. There's no vibrance. There may be some shivering, but there's no vibrance. Okay? So we need to get off this density and vibrance kick, okay? Now, if we want to have developments near transportation hubs, is anybody coaxing Microsoft and Amazon and other businesses to build in West Seattle? Because if everybody that doesn't have transportation is going someplace else to work, then it really kind of defeats the purpose of having people without cars. If they can walk or get a bus that's a short hop from, let's say where my neighborhood is there, on Avalon and Genesee, and catch a bus there and go down to, Westwood Village, well, then we got something solved, I think. So I don't know if the city is not reaching out to other major employers, and we have to get back to government having local offices, okay? Because all the employees for government don't need to be working downtown. They should be here too. Rezoning.
Okay, how much longer?
Just
a little bit more?
Just 2 more things, okay? Thank you. I did wait a long time. Rezoning. The urban village is kind of an interesting concept, but if we are going to look at, in our neighborhood, looked at the zoning along Avalon from 35th and Kentucky Fried Chicken all the way down to the bridge, we could find no rationale as to why it was zoned that way. It would have been good had the monorail gone in, and we could see a rationale for it. But if you want to put some mid-rises elsewhere, well, let's spread them out. Let's go down 35th. Let's go someplace else. Let's let those neighborhoods deal with the vibrance and the density. And lastly, I want to live in a livable city. You can say all the numbers you want. You can talk about walkability. You can talk about density at 216%. All I know is how I feel. And what I feel is that, I can't come uptown and find a parking spot to go and patronize one of the businesses I want to. And I sure as hell can't go to Safeway on a bus and bring back 6 or 8 bags of groceries for me and my wife. Okay? I can't do that. All right? So I want a livable city. And whatever planning can do to make it more livable for all of us, not necessarily to increase the density and cater to all the people who want to throw up 6 or 7 stories, sell it in a year and we're out. I want that livability. Thanks.
And if Super Council wants to say ditto, 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 that's fine too.
Ditto.
We'll take claps as dittos too.
I share a lot of the concerns that Marty voiced. One of the issues that is is high on my list right now is the micro-housing and very small units. The things that are being generated in what's supposed to be low-rise areas, LR zoning, and this use of the floor area ratio, where if you build a townhouse, you could build like 4 or 5 units. But if you use this, floor area ratio, you put in 30 or 40. It's a staggering difference. And in my mind's eye, it looks like it's just a hole in the design of the code. But, I'm looking at a 40-unit development across from my single-family home. That just doesn't seem right. And somebody has the ability, I know DPD has both the ability and the responsibility to actually use some judgment. But, they're promoting this plan. That's what's being advanced. So one of the questions I have is by having this floor area ratio, the guys that are going to build this build only that type of unit. So you have a property that has remarkably small units. Now, if you look at the life cycle of a property, there's going to be good markets, which we're having right now, but there's going to be bad markets too. They have no diversification of product type. So what happens when their tenants start getting sucked out? Because with the same rent, they can actually go into a full-size studio. Then you have a building looking for a use. It's got to be recycled. And that scares me almost as much as the initial development. But, none of it looks good from where I sit across the street. And I'm very suspect of the process. I know that DPD's been charged with the responsibility of putting density in. So we're seeing a lot of stuff. I drive around the city a lot. And, when you see these buildings, you know what they are. They go right out almost to the lot lines. They go straight up. And, they look like, butter sticks? Yeah.
Butter cube,
Yeah.
So DPD came up with their proposal for micro-housing that was presented to council 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, something like that. And we've had a couple meetings and a public hearing on that. I've been out in the community. I haven't heard very many people say we really like the proposal, frankly, from community members or even from developers. And that led me, working with my colleagues on the council and folks in the community, to try and create this work group to try and say, okay, let's, I'm not going to say throw that in the garbage, but let's think again about what a proposal is that's going to work for folks. Because I don't think, what I'm hearing is we don't have it right. DPD didn't get it right. And so we're going to go back and work through that, because I think a lot of the concerns you raised, you're not the first one that's told me those. And I want to address as many of those as I can.
That floor area ratio just doesn't seem to me to belong in LR zoning.
Okay.
And are you aware of any example where in a higher density zoning, they've actually built these micro units?
I think some have gone in mid-rise, but
as a unit type with other types of units, where a developer is building a conventional apartment building and says, I'm going to put in some micro housing also as a component.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I've heard any of those mixed uses.
Yeah. And you got to wonder why.
Well, it's the profit that they get from the window. So I am now,
one of the reasons is there's an interesting model where it includes Wi-Fi and all the utilities and everything, which isn't typical, I think, of apartments. And so it doesn't, the way it's being delivered, it doesn't lend itself to a mix very well. But I think the question of maybe it could, and we need to think through that too. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm gonna break because we're doing this sweep, right? I'm gonna go back and catch her before the kid has a meltdown, right? And that way, if you have to leave, you can. But realize I'm still trying to get across the room and then catch the others who came in later. So, go ahead.
So one thing I want to address is just the animosity that seems to be building between neighborhood and the government agencies like the PD, et cetera, and all of that it represents. I feel like the review process is the most, is the place where it manifests the most. But
the design review?
Yeah, the design review, essentially. But right now, like our neighborhood, in order to even be heard, in order to even have a fair voice at the table, had to raise a substantial amount of money just to get into, just to even be able to file an appeal and say, hey, no, we're serious, this isn't okay. That that's inappropriate.
That's a legal process. That was the channel.
That we had, and we didn't want to do that.
Right.
We came with a compromise. We were vocal about a compromise. We didn't say, hey, you can't build here. We said, hey, these are our concerns. You're not doing anything to mitigate our concerns. We went through several reviews. It was incredibly contentious, and all it did was breed a lot of animosity between the neighborhood, our representatives, and the whole process in general. It just left us feeling like it's broken. They don't serve us. And that's a really, really bad case to leave in a large community. We're talking about 150 houses here. To leave that in their mouth. And to have to dig into our pockets in a matter of 3 days to raise that cash, like, these are families. And so it really hurt me to see that Seattle doesn't care. So I'm very concerned about that. I love the city. I moved here from a Houston where sprawl is everything, and I hated it, and I don't want to lose that. So I'm really concerned about the amount of we're not being heard at all, and that can't be.
So anybody else left in this section? Okay, Diane?
Thank you. Diane Vincent, welcome to West Seattle. Thank you for coming out. My quick preamble is I have been going to design reviews in West Seattle for 7 years. I go to all the community meetings, so I know almost everybody in this room. I've seen people at many different meetings expressing a lot of concerns. And I also watch all the city council meetings, so I was watching the micro-housing yesterday. And one thing I just want to add about that is you and Nick Ricotta were asking some good questions of the fire marshal about how many stories, and you were saying 5 might be too high to go with a 3-foot stairwell. We have one going with 7 stories at the corner of 7th and Avalon, 35th and Avalon, and then another one is planned that's going to be 100+ micro units inside a 7-story building. So that's inside, no elevator, narrow stairwell. On the micro-housing issue, which I'll just stick to that, I've heard you say that you're going to convene a stakeholder group, and I applaud that. What I am concerned about is it was about a year ago that we had a couple hundred people show up at a town hall that Councilmember Rasmussen and Sally Clark put on, and people were calling for a moratorium on the micro-housing until it's figured out.
That was the one on Capitol Hill?
Yes,
I was there.
and it's a crazy mess. It's a crazy mess, and it's a moving target, and I know it's complex, and I'm glad you're getting the stakeholder group. But please, why can't we get a moratorium on this? Meanwhile, for the last year, and it's only been a year that we've known about it, to be fighting it, a year before that, the developers were already doing it. But they're still finding the loopholes, and they're still building these things like crazy. And I didn't read the article because I could predict what he said, but Roger Valdez, smart girl, aka the lobbyist for the developers, was applauding, oh good, they're going to have stakeholders, so we can keep going ahead and building this crap. So why can't we get a moratorium on these until we figure out all the little intricacies to put down some good base rules for it? That's my question.
Well, you're the first one that.
I'm on the string doll repeat on that one.
So I'm gonna just, I'm here because I work for all of you, and I have my opinions and my beliefs and my values and my vision for where I want the city to go. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be executing on what the bulk of the people believe in, and so I'm hearing a lot about that, and I'm trying to balance the concerns you raise and the concerns I hear from a lot of folks who can't afford to live in the city anymore or are ready to move out from their parents' home, and the only place that they're finding affordable are these micro units.
Can I add one more to that? I look at the Craigslist ads, and all I have to do is put in micros, and they're going anywhere from $950 to $1,300 a month for a pod. So they're not affordable. They're not affordable. Not on $15
What I hear from folks is they're less expensive than other alternatives. And so I'm not saying that there's...
It doesn't make them right.
Okay, we had Paul and then...
But everything's on the table, Diane, so...
So is moratorium on the table? While we figure
My goal is that in the next 6 weeks, we can come to a solution, and depending on how long it's going to take to implement that, moratorium is not my preferred path. I'm told that to the folks. But I'm also here listening to folks, and so Your voice plus the applause, I'm hearing that.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul? I've got the clock running, Paul.
All right.
Okay.
Mike, thanks again for coming out. Appreciate when you came out to the neighborhood before, really do. One would be the concept of creating a legislative element that says the DPD has to do the SEPA stuff proper, especially in places where we've met the growth targets. We're over the 100% growth targets. Like the Junction is at 200 and actually probably 17% right now. So can you please support that? That's what I'm asking. Because it's right now getting ridiculous. We're going to end up as bad as what's going on in Ballard. And it's just the reality. I feel bad for them. So that would be one.
The SEPA, say that.
So what DPD does is, to which it sidesteps, changes the numeric counts in microhousing so that they don't have to do proper SEPA evaluations and EIS and everything else.
Yeah.
And if we're in a state where we're already at, we got 10 years before the 2024, and we're already at 270%, we should be saying, stop. If you're going to build something with that kind of density, you're going to do an EIS.
Yeah.
Legislate that. You know, this can be just for the spaces that meet the criteria.
And I don't know that it's EIS typically, but designer.
No, I'm talking.
Oh, EIS.
EIS.
Because those are the impacts that we're really all, shade is one thing, but concurrency and the transportation is
Right.
Okay,
what it's.
we'll bring that back to the
And
group.
we can go on to that. The second thing would be to require parking again. Just,
Yes.
we do not have mass transit here. We are not going to have mass transit till what, 2018 to 2022? Maybe light rail, if it even hits West Seattle, it's chosen for that. We're already at capacity at that point. So let's seriously look at this from that standpoint. One more thing, you said it earlier, and I thought it was really cool, but we'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm gonna do a second sweep, so you got a few minutes to rebrain track.
Okay.
Michael.
Michael Taylor Judd. I'm a board member with the North Delridge Neighborhood Council. I'm also a board member with the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. I'll say part of me wants to say ditto to a lot of this stuff. I agree about more design review, more neighborhood notice, more neighborhood plan, strengthening neighborhood planning, a lot of the stuff that's been said. But I've also got to say to the folks that are in this room, it's getting increasingly difficult to sit in community meetings like this. Because what I see is a majority of people who are in their 50s, their 60s, sometimes their 70s. They're people who own houses. You've had your houses for 25, 30 years. And I get that you've bought into a certain type of, a certain idea of what your neighborhood looked like. But the reality is nobody else can afford to buy houses anymore. And it's not just people moving from elsewhere. There are people who grew up here in Seattle, who grew up in West Seattle, whose parents are still in West Seattle, who cannot afford to buy the houses here. And they're looking for other alternatives. And what I really start to hear from some people, not everyone, but some people is, I don't want the kind of people who would live in that other kind of housing. Or you've got to require parking because since I drive, everyone must have parking, which is not what the data tells us. Or, if someone wants to buy and then look for a spot to park on the street, that should be their choice. You don't own the parking spots on the street, so why is it okay for you to use the parking on the street, but not for anybody else who comes in after you? And that's what I feel like I keep hearing. As much as I agree with everybody, because I own a home here in West Seattle, and I want to live in West Seattle for a long time, and I value the character of our neighborhood, I also want other people to be able to come in and live here. And I want there to be a whole variety of housing and a diverse group of people, because I was just down in San Francisco a couple of weeks visiting friends, and if you want to see what happens if we start putting caps on housing, if we start limiting where people can go, we're going to end up like San Francisco. And no one can afford to live in San Francisco anymore. And they add 35,000 jobs, and we only add 3,000 units of housing, and that doesn't work. That's how you get the sprawl they have down there. That's how you get the sprawl they have in Southern California. That's how you get the sprawl they have in Houston, as one woman read. So if we want to be environmentally friendly, we've got to figure out what that balance is to maintain growth and protect our neighborhood character. to have diversity and have good-looking buildings. And I'm not hearing enough of that discussion. I hear a lot more of, no, I don't want anything to change. I want it to stay the way it was when I moved here. And I don't think that's realistic.
You're getting close to a good segue for us when we go on to solutions. Because I think some of that. Okay, so I'm just going to finish this section. Anybody else got comments over here? Because then I'll come back this way. And anybody on the same, okay.
Can I say one thing as we transition?
Well, no, we have a transition.
Oh.
We're still concerns, and we only got a half an hour left, right? So I think I'm going to end up making one sweep back, because I've heard concerns and all that already. So, but I got to make it to that side. So you and then you.
I just wanted to reiterate some of the complaints about safety, walkability. I live on 36th up here, and you take your life in your hands trying to get across 35th, Fauntleroy, or California in crosswalks. Even the lights are consistently run for when pedestrians are trying to get across to the library up here. And I wish that the Seattle transportation people would look at where the lights are and do some careful things for walkability, safety.
Yeah. So what did you say you wanted to say before we just keep going then?
I just wanted to comment, DPD is coming back on the 28th, and they told me about this, and I've heard a number of comments about frustration with DPD, not just in the room tonight, but consistently in my new role as chair of land use. The people at DPD that I work with are good people, and they're trying their best. And I'm not to say they're not perfect, but they operate in kind of a confined framework of which they can do. And I told them that I want to make really sure that if they come out to the community, that they're coming out to talk to the community in a way, and engage the community in a way that's productive to you, not just in a way so DPD can say we came out to the community on June 28th. And so as we go back through, if folks have suggestions, start having suggestions, if there's things and ways you want DPD to engage, I'm going to come back and help really shape what that meeting looks like, and I'm looking for feedback.
Okay. And Josh has left the his business cards in the back so that if you have something when you get home tonight that you want to send it to him by email. Okay, so there was someone back. There you are.
I just wanted to second the gentleman's comment here who was talking about San Francisco as our future, as well as to bring in another aspect. I totally agree. I like density. I like the way West Seattle is. I like the single-family housing that's available. I think there needs to be a balance of both. Because I think if we don't bring more people in, it's going to just make all the housing prices be unreachable for more and more people. And that's not what I want to see here in West Seattle. To me, we need to really bear down on transit because we cannot bring more people into West Seattle and have these areas of high density along with single-family housing without finding ways to get people off the peninsula. We need transit. So I don't know what the solution is, but we need to do something. That's a part of the solution. I'm not one who wants to, I would consider a temporary stop to these apartments. But I think ultimately I'd like to see more density, but also we need to find ways to bring everything.
Housing transit. Yeah. I'm also on the board of Sound Transit, and so with two different hats, I'm listening to that.
Okay, this lady and then the lady next to her. Did you just stick your hand
Well, I
in?
just wanted, can we confirm that statistic about this road is 200?
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah, transportation hasn't changed at all, as far as I can tell. It's the same routes, fewer express routes. How can that be?
And just to be clear, my understanding is it's not that it's grown 217%, it's that the amount of growth that was projected to happen, we've exceeded that by 200%. And I don't know what the absolute number of the number of units that was supposed to be.
1,600.
And so instead of 1,600, we've added
3,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so you and then the lady in the light blue. You've already spoken, so we're going to get some other people first. As long as the kid doesn't melt down.
Okay, going
Going back to the apartments on 41st between Oregon and Genesee. I live next door to Jim, so I'm well aware of what this goofy thing is. The parking, for the most part, of all the people who work up at the junction or work in the construction areas are along on the west side of 41st. And then Microsoft has released, apparently, a place for their connector bus to pick up people down at 41st and Genesee. So when the parking lot down there is full, they're on the street along with this. And there is no excess parking on 41st to accommodate an apartment building of 40 units, because the assumption that those people will have no cars other than the 5 parking places that are provided is pretty lame. If it was next door to the University of Washington or Seattle College or even the SUP, it'd be something else. But there is not a college already. Nobody would live up here on 41st to go over to the South Seattle Community College. It'd be too much work to ever get there by a bus.
Can't get there from here.
Yeah.
And when the 128's gone, for sure you can't get from here to there.
But this parking situation narrowly focused between Alaska and Genesee is insane to put a 40-unit building on that block.
Thank you.
Transition stage yet?
Pardon?
Are we in this transition?
Yeah, keep going. I mean, we've only got 20-something minutes left, so
Okay,
have
just
at
a
it.
couple of ideas. I know of this 40-unit complex with only 5 or 2 parking spots and stuff like that. And I understand that we do need growth, but do we need growth at the expense of the people that have already given to this community? For instance, some of these developments don't have to pay property tax for several years. They're not giving back to the community that these property tax people are paid for. That's one thing. If we had some property tax, if they had to pay property tax, or if not, if they were charged a fee, if they're going to rely on the bus system so that their parking isn't enacted, then they should be giving a portion of the project, say 20% fee, to goes directly to Metro. That takes some of the heat off of our taxpayers, because it seems like we either want to increase car tax or increase property taxes for developers who are getting away with nothing. They're not paying for our schools, they're not giving to our libraries, they're not doing anything. And if you want a community of a lot of different types of people, we need that infrastructure. And transportation, the tunnel has been delayed now. I'm in a van pool. I take a van pool every day. Doesn't help me any when I'm trying to get up the viaduct, but still I do it. And then the other thing too is safety. We have no hospital here. And if you look at I think it's Genesee and 41st, where they plan on doing that, there's traffic circles. How does a hook and ladder get around a traffic circle if there's a fire in that unit?
Thank you.
I had a comment, but I forgot it, so I'm sorry.
We'll come back.
Yeah.
Anybody else in this section? No? Gentlemen, you had your hand way up a long time ago.
My name is Terrell Harrington, and
Oh, now
I
it's
actually run the small hospital that we do have in West Seattle. I have to go. I've been patient a couple of times. But I want to say that I moved here from Chicago, and I'm very familiar with the concept of urban villages. This is not what an urban village really is, what's being planned here. And I can tell you that what real urban villages include places for everyone, not just the new people that are moving in. My daughter can't live in this neighborhood, and I moved here 15 years ago, and my own daughter, she lives in where the most affordable place she could find is. I'm worried that, as everyone else is, that there's a lot of changes that are coming. Many of them aren't completely thought out. But my concerns are that I know change is coming. I know density is coming. The question is, how can we mitigate that for the best, for the largest number of people? The things that seem to be really not being looked upon are real urban villages also include more types of businesses than just bars and restaurants. And I'm really disappointed that with the large number of people that I'm seeing now that are working for these big mega companies, we're not doing enough to keep those people working right here in our community. People I know that work for Google and Amazon and Microsoft, they tell me that on the east side, they've got little zones where people come in to work. Why haven't we explored the possibility of diffusing some of this intense growth only in a few locations dispersed some of that into trying to encourage them to build smaller buildings that fit the neighborhood, where some of these people can work here in the community rather than trying to constantly bring so much growth in and busing them in and out and traveling by cars in and out. I think that we're completely missing the opportunity.
Just speak up.
I'm sorry, I think we're missing the opportunity to actually increase business development in West Seattle, where we can keep jobs here in West Seattle, decrease some of this commuting that's going on, try to encourage more of the people that are moving here to use the community for more than going out for a bar at nighttime and then going back to a small apartment. I think we just have to broaden our concept of what an urban village actually is and actually try to utilize our community for more than just single blocks of stone to cram people in to live at nighttime.
So are you talking about like kind of remote hubs where workers would come and work like a couple days a week instead of going to Redmond, they'd work there?
In Chicago, every neighborhood has where I'm from, and I love my hometown, but I'm glad to be here these days. But I can tell you, every neighborhood has restaurants, but every neighborhood also has parks. Every neighborhood also has buildings where people work locally. And that's not just restaurants. We can't be Capitol Hill, where it's mostly restaurants and bars. But we can be a small community where we have a building that actually tries to encourage Amazon to keep workers here in West Seattle working by. We're in a modern era. These people can work, many of them, by computer.
Like the Office Junction that just went on in down at Morgan?
Exactly. We need more of that kind of development. We actually need to be focusing more on trying to accommodate all of us, not just holding on to the old guard, but building for the future. And I think right now, we're not thinking outside the box. What we're creating is very tall strip malls is what we're creating right now. And we really need to be cautious about that before you just have a lot of very tall buildings where people are still moving back and forth. I gotta go. Thank you.
No, yeah, it's not that, but the kids in between breakdowns, so go fast. Pete, ceded to you.
So I'm a contractor and Amazon employee. I am the person who's coming into Seattle, moved here 5 years ago, now own a family home, lived in apartments in Belltown. I know that I've been through a lot of what we're talking about. And the biggest problem I came when I come here is I needed a car. Like I had to travel, I had to do things, I needed a car. It was unrealistic to expect to have a car. I understood that I would have to pay more for it, and I respected that. But my building apartment didn't provide enough parking for the building that it was. And this is in Belltown, right? So, I mean, it's not like it didn't have the space to go deep and put in big parking lots. It didn't have enough parking. It raised parking every single 6 months or a year or whatever, to the point where it was completely outpricing me. Like, I mean, I'm working at Amazon, I'm not exactly on the poor end of the spectrum. Like, I should be able to afford to have one car. And I'm worried that that's exactly what's going to happen here in West Seattle. And not everybody's fortunate enough to have a job that can cover it. Like, I was paying, more than 40% of my salary in rent and just parking one car. That's ridiculous. Like, so how is someone who is, this is like a small 700 square foot apartment. This isn't like, lap of luxury kind of stuff here, right? Like, so how is it okay for us to build that in West Seattle and already restrain it where, one, they're not funding for transit. So living in West Seattle, I use transit as much as I can, but I still have a 40 plus minute commute, and it's only 7 miles from here to SLU. Like, it shouldn't be that long to get there, but I have to do transfers, and those aren't reliable, and they're going away come September when we do bus cuts. So I'm going to have to drive more. I don't know how we can be thinking that the solutions that we have are serving even the people who are the newcomers, who are coming in. You're not serving me right now. And so to say that it's only, the people who've been here 50 years are complaining, no, I've been here 4. I've been through all the stages. I'm complaining. Seattle isn't serving the needs that I have right now. It's not serving the needs of my coworkers, and we can't find places to live, and we can afford to pay the exorbitant amount of rent money. That's unsustainable.
So Pete.
So, Pete Spalding, in this year's budget, you and your fellow council members allotted some money for the Delridge neighborhood to update their neighborhood plan. You also have some money in the SDOT budget to do a revisioning project of Delridge Way Southwest. My concern is that both of these projects were brought forward and pushed by the community with a lot of community input, and that's the reason that you and your fellow council members put the money into the budget. The problem now is that DPD and SDOT are driving the ship, and they're not listening to what we're saying out here in the community. You know, we're the ones that live here. I agree with a lot of what everybody said tonight, but we have got to be listened to. You know, we're the ones that live here. We know what makes this community tick. We know what makes this a community, and I think we're losing it because the folks at DPD and SDOT, there's some great people down there, but they're single-minded, and it's their way or the highway, and they're not listening to what we're saying out here in the neighborhoods. For example, I won't put any names out there, but an individual from DPD has come to the Delridge Neighborhoods District Council meeting twice to talk about the neighborhood plan update, and has asked us for input. Unless this man has a photographic memory, he's not taking the first note. He's off on another path, totally not listening to what we in the community are saying. And I think that's where it's got to stop.
Big concern that I've heard about just how DPD is working with communities. And so I can do some stuff on that. And on the specifics, maybe we can talk offline, Pete, about both getting DPD and SDOT in the room to address those specifics.
Thanks.
So I'm going to do Vlad, and then we're going to, for sure, spend the last 14 minutes on any other suggestions or ideas. For sure, just make sure that we got all that captured. Vlad?
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for coming here, and I realize what a difficult job you have. As you know,
I did sign up for it, and I love my job.
That's
Vlad.
okay.
Thank you for acknowledging
Welcome to
that.
the Foreign Legion. So I'm an architect and a planner, and I've been involved with a lot of land use issues since I've been in the city. And in the last few years, I feel like a doctor in a hospital that is being run badly, and patients are really sick because of really bad policies that are being handled by DPD. And I think DPD is dysfunctional. There is a way to accommodate growth in the city in a way that enhances the quality of life for everybody. I really believe that. That's my profession, so I believe that. But that's not happening. It's actually kind of cross purposes. So I think that one of the first things to do is to reintegrate the neighborhoods into the planning process. And when the neighborhood plans were being done for the urban villages, the Department of Neighborhoods was actually staffed and provided a level of neighborhood support that acted as an interface between DPD and their ivory tower downtown and the communities that actually all this stuff was going to happen with. And that was a very healthy process. In the late 90s, when I moved to West Seattle, the neighborhood plans were going on, and I was really impressed with how they were being handled. Since that time, there's been a lot of degeneration of those neighborhood plans, unfortunately, and the Department of Neighborhood connection evaporated. So to me, that would be one way to immediately create an interface that would start the dialogue happening between DPD. But you should not bring DPD and expect DPD to do the job. You need Department of Neighborhoods to do it from the ground up instead of from the top down. That's really important.
You ready to do that?
Good. So we'll start over on that side, and we'll sweep, kind of looking for those good suggestions, those great ideas that you want to share with Mike.
I've been watching this process with DPD, Seattle City Light, SDOT, and they are well-meaning. However, they're not capable of dealing with groups that come to them with concerns. You've heard what goes on. So, urban neighborhoods really has done a very good job in the past, and it's very complimentary. So I would say that SDOT should subcontract out on some way to Department of Neighborhoods, the interface, because Department of Neighborhoods is really good at interfacing. DPD is horrendous at interfacing in their, So I would say in terms of process, Seattle City Council, the redo the process of how the departments interface with the neighborhoods, because it ain't been working so far. It used to work better, as Vlad has mentioned. So let's look at what the core functional problem is, and maybe that'll help with the.
Department of Neighborhoods
Spoken yet.
Department of Neighborhoods does do a great job, and we've tried to leverage that with utilities a bit, but we can do more. And I think that's something I can try and work with the new mayor on that too. So I think that's an outstanding idea.
For those of you who are actually getting up and leaving, don't forget to use your dots. We got a couple sheets up here to concurrence. So I'm going to do you, and then over to you.
Well, Renee mentioned that all these things are guidelines that DCD is supposed to be using. Why can't we make them requirements? Why can't they be required to help protect the neighborhoods?
Okay.
Because they find little ways to kind of just discount what we want as some of our concessions.
I think that our neighborhood isn't saying no to growth, we just want it to be reasonable. We would love the crappy buildings to be new, but just reasonable. And also, is rent control, Todd?
Is what?
Rent control.
Rent control?
Current state law prohibits local jurisdictions from putting rent control in place. That's not to say that I don't have at least one colleague on the city council who but we've had a change in state law, which I think is probably unlikely in the near future. That specific tool, I believe, is not available. But I think the concern that people are trying to address when they talk about rent control, about how do we manage to keep some of these units affordable for some of the people that, that actually are working and have decent jobs and just can't afford it, or they're retired or whatever, is a legitimate concern that on my affordable housing work I'm doing, we need to find other tools that was not available.
Okay, Joe hasn't spoken yet. Was there another hand over here not spoken? And then I'm going to get you guys. We still got a couple minutes. Joe.
Hi, I'm not Joe Swatchy. A lot of people, some of you might not realize that those growth targets that we keep talking about, the 200% growth and such, they're just suggestions. That's all they are. They're not binding on anybody. What about as a possibility? Because there are some neighborhoods that would love to have growth. Roosevelt fought like hell to get the light rail routing through them and to get more upzoning and everything. Why not, if some area is over their target, disincentivize building there, take away the tax exemption, and shift that entire thing proportionally, figure out what the formula is into a neighborhood that wants it, like say Roosevelt wants it, or maybe Columbia City, or whoever, or Westwood Village, down in that area. We would love to have a lot more commercial down there and stuff like that besides just the mall. So maybe do something like that and automate it, take the politics out of it, get like an economist, something, hire somebody to figure out that balance and have it automatically
pass
shift.
through the trigger.
This particular neighborhood A goes over some percentage, 150, then automatically their incentive drops for the next application, the next day, 50%, and it goes up everywhere else. So there's parity.
Just in case there's anyone from Roosevelt that ever watches this, most of the people did not want the growth in Roosevelt. but I think there are neighborhoods that aren't getting much growth at all.
And to help those neighborhoods.
Okay, I'm going to go. Paul, this is the hands that I've seen earlier now. We're down to hands. Paul, Dick, you guys, and you in the back again. Paul.
So, just to go back to microhousing, no, we're not, as we're nerds, neighborhoods encouraging regional development. It's our thing, just want to throw it out there. The concept of the microhousing, we're not against it, and if somebody wants to live it up, that's fine. But the issue is to count them accurately for their actual density impact, which means if you are leasing a unit to somebody, you have a person lease impact to that space. And that person is more than likely going to have, or at least 50% of them are going to have cars. And that means there's going to be traffic, and it means there's going to be congestion, and so forth. So bring back, by a city council move, accurate counts on the micro, so that the real density gets counted.
And that's on our list of things we're addressing. So that's a great one.
Just one quick add on that. Why not accurate counts on cars? A car fee. Every car you own, pay a fee towards your impact. Single family owner, micro housing, whatever. Why not that?
Contact or card.
I'm not sure that we should be actually going back and forth.
But no, that was a suggestion.
Yeah, yeah, so Dick, and then you guys, Dick.
Coming back to the question of affordability, I don't think that there's a whole lot we can do to keep prices steady anywhere, but the thing I do see is that the developers have a great incentive to maximize the size of whatever it is, whatever lot or property they build. And I went to a meeting 2 years ago where developers were asked, why don't you build cottages in residential neighborhoods? It's because they can make more money putting up a great big house. So why not consider some kind of code which says if you've got to replace a house with something similar in scale. Don't tear down a little bungalow and put up $1 million home, which is what we see in our neighborhood. 3 of them. 3 brand new $1 million plus homes where there were not what I'd call affordable houses, but at least houses that somebody with median income might be able to afford.
You two fight it out, who's first?
I like this suggestion, I guess, it's some way finding a way of informing people in the community when things are taking place. You know, if you suppose there's going to be zone changes within 300 feet of the potential zone change, when you're in a process taking 2.5 years to go from the design process out in the community to get to the city of Seattle, people lose interest. They don't have the time to keep chasing the different hearing meetings and everything else that takes place. So some way of either contracting the amount of time it takes from the time you do the planning to you bring it to the council, and having someone notifying the public when you're making zone changes, or you're going to make changes. I mean, right now, I thought I understood the process, but I found there's basically a hunting season once a year when the DP opens it up, and everybody's going to make their changes. Well, the neighbors don't know about this after a change has been made. Some way of informing us ahead of time to try and lower down animosity is developed between neighborhoods in the city.
We're down to the last 5 minutes, and I got one announcement to make, so did you still want to do something?
Yeah, so let's talk about the next election. What is your plan and vision for Seattle?
Okay, I'm gonna deflect that one to the very end, okay? Because we brought in people here to hear us.
I'd like to simply reiterate something about the paradigm.
Speak up, you gotta speak up.
Michael came up to our neighborhood and walked around with us, and Sally Clark came up, and Tom Rasmussen came up, Peter Steinbrook came up. They all walked around and we talked to them about what we didn't especially like to see going in our neighborhood. I kept hearing from one of the council members about Seattle being a world-class city, okay? And if your vision is to make Seattle a world-class city, it's going to take all the stuff you're doing, and it's going to be at the expense of all the neighborhoods. It's going to be all the density. The 2 world-class cities we have in America now are really New York and LA. We ain't nowhere close to what they are and what they do and what they do, okay? But when I hear the paradigm taking shape, and I can only suspect that the guilty people that are pushing for the world-class city are those people that are in the STEM area. Nothing against the STEM people. But they're looking for a world-class city. That's density, along with that vibrance that you get, and the transportation, major transportation. You know, backyard cottages, apartments, everything else. That's the way you get a world-class city. We can't do that in Seattle. We cannot handle a world-class city. We need to tone down the paradigm to make it a comfortable, medium-sized city that everybody can find a very livable place. Thank you.
Any burning one, because, you know,
Just one.
10 seconds, go.
Okay, transit center station.
Good.
We need a central transit center station because we're attracting people from all around the city that want to come and go to dinner here and shop here, and they're not going to come with their kids and take the bus after the soccer game. You know, some will and some won't. And we need to think about a transit center location and a station that's world-class and maybe has shopping, who knows, but where people can come and park their smart cars and recharge and go and shop.
Okay, you haven't spoken.
Historic neighborhoods have historic boards composed of members of the community as well as people appointed from the
the mayor's office to review everything that is built or any external thing done in those neighborhoods? Is there a way to apply that to the urban villages so that the community has a greater voice in what happens in their neighborhood?
I don't know the answer, but that's an idea.
Okay, so there's 3 things that are gonna happen now. If you have to leave to go relieve your babysitter or whatever, don't forget to spend your green dot as you go out. Matt asked to say one thing that we should have said at the beginning about district councils, and then I'll turn it back over to Mike for final comments in his campaign speech, if he wants to do that.
Briefly, again, I want to thank everyone for being out here tonight. You came to a district council meeting this evening because you were passionate about what we were going to be speaking about. What I want to turn back to you guys is that each and every one of you lives within a neighborhood council in West Seattle. Each and every one of you has an opportunity to engage on a regular basis on strengthening your neighborhood, on making your voice more heard, on uniting as a group and getting your issues known and acted upon. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a vibrant voice in your neighborhood councils. Getting your elected leaders to hear you, making change, causing things to happen in a direction that you're interested in seeing happen, this is where to do it. Here at the district council level, we represent all of the neighborhood councils within that district. You can join the district councils, but I encourage you strongly, get engaged in your neighborhood council. Find out when they meet. Try out a meeting. We're asking for a total of 2 hours of your time a month. You'll likely want to give more. It's a high-value proposition.
And it's addictive. And if you're not sure what your neighborhood council is, stop by Yoon and say, this is where I live, and she'll probably be able to peg it for you.
So thanks again for coming.
Okay, closing words for Mike.
First, I want to thank everyone for being here today. And I also, Cindy, I really appreciate you both emceeing and creating a good format. I hope this was productive for folks. The tone of the conversation today was frankly, from my perspective, the best I've heard it being up in the neighborhood. So, West Seattle, my new favorite neighborhood. Whose question? Was it your question? I'm not going to give my campaign speech, but I'm going to tell you about my vision for Seattle. Just because I want to make sure people understand my values and where I'm coming from as I navigate this. I'm born and raised in Seattle. I've lived in my single-family home in Fremont for 19 years. It's in a multifamily zone. It's an LR zone. A lot of what you've talked about, I'm living through myself. I care immensely about my neighborhood. I care immensely about the city. I want to make sure that Seattle is a vibrant neighborhood. I know that word gets overused. I want to make sure that the people that live here, that my kids will feel that Seattle's a home for them when they grow up, and that if they want to live in Seattle, there's a place they can afford and feel comfortable and can raise what would hopefully someday be my grandkids. I also hope from people from around the country and around the world who find their way to Seattle, whether it's because a great job at Amazon, or they're a PhD going for the Gates Foundation, or they're a refugee from a war-torn Syria or whatever it is, when they end up here, that there's a spot for them and for them to make this their home as they grow up too. And that means there's challenges, and we touched on some of those today about how do we create housing that's affordable and works for people, how do we create the jobs in our neighborhoods that work, how do we make sure we have that transportation infrastructure and other things like hospitals that work for us, and also respect that we have these communities that we feel very strongly about, and many of us in this room actually built these communities to what they are today, and as they change, that's really hard. And I don't have a great answer on how I exactly resolve all that. Part of it's about having conversations with folks. Part of it is about some of the suggestions that you had today. I heard some new ideas that are really intriguing. Part of it's about, I hope, convening work groups. Cindy's going to be on, I hope, on the micro-housing work group. I can convince you to be on that. Where we can actually bring some people around a table and spend, instead of a few minutes each, a few hours where we can talk back and forth about, is this a solution that might work, and what are the impacts of this, and think through these issues at a bigger level. So that hopefully we can come back out to the city and keep it, reinventing ourselves a bit to do a better job. Because right now I'm clearly hearing a lot of frustration in the neighborhoods from people that really just care about their neighborhood. And it's a good thing that you care. It's a great thing that you're showing up and being engaged. I'd like to see that the process is efficient, because I know you're all busy people, and on a night like tonight, would probably rather be in a lot of other places than talking or listening to me. But to the extent that we can make this an efficient process where folks have real input in how to change what our communities look like or how they directly grow, that's part of the goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh, who's going to go home and soak his arm. Make sure you vote, because I did hear some great suggestions tonight. So thank you again.